Well, so I'm curious, what does your actual coaching practice look like? So someone signs up, like what is the process that you offer them when they sign up?
Um, I, Man, I'm gonna sound more California woo-woo and all that the more I talk, but I just try to meet people where they're at. Carl Rogers, the guy who comes from the person-centered perspective, I mean, he is my homeboy. Like, I love his approach. It's about being with people, and that doesn't sound very technical because I don't have a three-step process. I don't have a first we do this, this, and this. It's been my experience that people are too unique and individualized, and it's been my experience that whenever I hear about a coach who uses a technique with someone and then I think that sounds cool, I'll try it, the person feels like a technique is being used upon them. It doesn't feel organic. So I'm really big on just meeting people where they're at. I think that's the most important thing. People want to know that they matter and they want to be understood. Now, that is not to say that I get on the phone with people and I'm just their buddy or that somebody pays me to cheerlead. I find that in being with people where they're at, meeting them where they're at, the right question, in fact, the most powerful question for them to explore has room to arise. Again, I get that that sounds woo-woo, but when I create a space where I'm not walking into the session with a preconceived idea of what someone needs or what the process is supposed to look like, they say something that somehow allows me to connect to the next right thing, the question that makes them stop for a minute and go, I'd never thought of it that way before. I don't know. Or the thing that opens up some emotion that they've really needed to get out. It's another rogue element in coaching. I don't think that tears are solely the domain of therapy. I think that sadness is normal in the same way that fear is normal, and it's going to come up when someone's trying something new that they're afraid of. I look at where fear is showing up. I look at where not trusting yourself is showing up. And then I look at as close to strategy as I think I get, as I look at the stories that underlie that. I'm very big on what's the story. And what I mean by that is I guess that I love Byron Katie's analogy that if you're walking through a forest and you see a snake coiled up ahead of you on the path, you're going to be afraid and you're not likely to move forward. But if you suddenly get a little bit closer or you focus in and you realize it's not a snake up ahead of you, it's a rope, you can't go back to seeing the snake. Like you can't, you know? And so in life, when things are fearful, when people aren't trusting themselves, where are they seeing a snake and how can we get them to see the rope?
Okay. And so I'm curious, for the people who are watching who are like, that shit sounds awesome, I want to do more of that stuff. What are some actions that people can take to be able to get to that place? And specifically, you said one thing that was really interesting to me is like if you catch somebody not trusting themselves, that you like to pay attention to that. How would you work with somebody who isn't trusting themselves? What kind of actions would you or questions would you take to address that?
I would say, so I tend to, coaching tends to be very much, it's like, oh, coaching is over here in the land of the cognitive behavioral. There's accountability, there's cheerleading, which I kind of cringe at the idea. Um, I was never a cheerleader. There's rewards and consequences. And then therapy is seen as like this place where you go for emotions and working with the past. I often find myself saying to clients when we're trying to parse through a situation, there are two different ways that we can work on this, and we can work on these two different tracks as like a parallel track. They're like moving together. I tend to think that people need to actually work on both levels. There is something about being afraid of writing that book proposal and hiring a coach and being very accountable and having someone to report to each week. I did do the writing I needed to do, or I resisted it and avoided it. There's also something really interesting to explore about the fear that might cause someone to resist writing the proposal or being accountable. Personally, I love writing, for instance. I feel fear working on my own book proposal, but I love the writing too much to let the fear be this thing that keeps me from doing it. How's that mechanism different for someone else? How can we explore it? What's it related to? What's their story about if this book proposal gets accepted? Are they doing it to feel successful, to externalize their happiness? It's such a rich territory. And the great news is that we can look at them at the same time, and that shifting one shifts the other, shifting this one shifts this one. That's what I love about the process.
If someone is watching this and they're working with a client who doesn't trust themselves, how would they go about like going into that and helping them gain more trust in themselves?
Well, I don't have a process. You know, what I will say is that the first question that organically arose when you said that is, if you were my client and you said I don't trust myself, instead of saying why not, my first question would probably be, what would life look like if you did? And exploring that. Because if someone isn't trusting themselves, looking at what life would be like if they did gives me some entry point, some idea of what they are resisting. I might also explore whether or not they do in fact trust themselves, because the fact that they're showing up for a session with me says something about their belief in their own capacity to change their lives.
You're good. That's great.
I love the work. That's what I think it comes down to.